name is Rebecca van Leeuwen, and I'm coordinating the EU Heores project. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar, so Shaping the Future of Energy Communities. We're very happy that so many of you have been able to join us today, although be it online and not in person, but thank you for joining us. So today's webinar, we will begin with some key findings from our EU Heores project, and this will be followed by a discussion on the future of solar communities, and we'll also discuss the implications of the Renewable Energy Directive, in particular Articles 21 and 22 on prosumers and energy communities. And we'll also explore some key feedback from external stakeholders, so including community groups, DSOs, policy advisors, governments, as to the barriers and the opportunities for growing the community PV sector. So I'm going to begin with a brief introduction, brief overview into the EU Heores project, and zoom in on some of the main results and the main impacts. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about the aim of the project and the activities, the partners, who I like to refer to as the heroes. They are the heroes themselves, the work methodology, the main results and impact, although our work package leaders will give more detail on the results in their presentations. And finally, I'd like to leave you with some concluding remarks. Next slide, please. Okay, so the full title of the project is EU Routes for High Penetration of Solar PV into Local Networks. So a bit of a mouthful, so we have the acronym EU Heores. It's a European funded project under the Horizon 2020 programme, and we started in September 2017, and we will finish on the 31st of August this year. So we're almost at the end of our 3-year project. The time has gone very, very quickly. So the main aim of the project is to enable increased deployment of community PV through new models enabling grid integration. And the project aims to bring together all relevant stakeholders in the PV market. So the network operators, the local initiators, the energy specialists, citizens, policymakers, to create a win-win situation for everybody involved. And the main activities involve understanding, on the one hand, the needs of the energy communities, and on the other, the needs of the network operators. Also to develop new business models and to pilot these business models. So it's all about empowering citizen engagement in the just transition for a cleaner and greener society. Next slide, please. The partners, the EU Heroes. We have the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, or RVO, from the Netherlands. I'd also like to welcome my colleagues today, Otto Bans and Vido van Heemstra, who you'll hear from later on in the discussion. From CRES, Greece, we have Vangelis with us today, and Kiki and Elena, and hopefully Tassos will join us later too, so welcome. From Creera, Spain, we have Andrea. Welcome, Andrea. Dana, Germany. Welcome, Moritz. From Protect Lithuania, we have Juras and Vitas. Welcome. And from Karpa, Poland, Piotr and Richard. Also welcome. And from the Energy Saving Trust from the UK, we have a whole team. Hello, Graham, Jack, Michael, Paul, and anyone else, and Ewan, and anyone else who's joined us, welcome. And also it's nice to see that there's also people with us today from countries outside of our project. I noticed we have representatives, for example, from Portugal. So anyway, welcome to all of you. And just, I'd like to mention that the partnership was formed through the Renewable Energy Working Group of the European Energy Network, ENR, which is the network of the energy agencies in Europe, which some of you may be familiar with. And the Netherlands Enterprise Agency is holding the presidency of this network this year. So anyway, you can see we have a nice geographical spread in our project. Next slide. The work methodology. Yeah, our project's divided into what we call work packages. So we have the overall management and coordination. Then the two blue boxes on the left and the right-hand side are the cross-cutting work packages. So work package 2 is all to do with stakeholder engagement, led by Dana, Germany. And then the work package 6 is the communication and dissemination, led by the Energy Saving Trust in the UK. And then in the middle, we have the work package 3, the case study monitored performance data analysis, led by CRES in Greece. Then we have the work package 4, the economic modeling tool, financial tool, led by Criera, Spain. And finally, the work package 5 is all about testing the models in real pilot projects, led by Protec, Lithuania. Next slide, please. Now, without going into too much detail, because Vangelis will tell you more about this in a few moments, but the work package 3, in work package 3, we analysed physical and electrical data from many different case studies, so 11 in total, 11 case studies from the 7 participating countries. Yeah, so Vangelis will tell you more later. Next slide. This work package 4 is all to do with the business model development and training. So within this work package, led by Criera, Spain, the financial tool has been developed to evaluate the different business models for the case study projects. And the tool also includes impact of batteries or demand side management. And again, Andrea will go into further detail about this in a few moments. Next slide, please. The main features of the tool, the community solar tool, are that it's aimed at energy communities, business modeling, it can cover community scale, it includes battery storage, sensitivity analysis, and it's fairly easy to use, Excel-based with a user guide, and it can be found on our website at the address shown below. So you're all free to use this tool. Next slide, please. And we're now in the final phases of our project, where we're actually testing the model in the 7 pilots in the 7 countries. So this work package is dedicated to demonstrating the tools developed under the project and to emphasize their ability to support community project developers and owners. Again, Vitas from Protec in Lithuania will give more detail on this in a few moments. Next slide, please. Something on the main impacts of the project. Regarding the strategic impact, now during the course of the project, we've been following closely the development of the Renewable Energy Directive, in particular Articles 21 and 22, and we're providing recommendations for effective implementation. And we're delighted to say that energy communities are now included in European legislation. And I'd also like to mention here our collaboration with 2 related PV projects who you may have heard of. So the PVP for Grid and iDistributed PV. We work very closely with these 2 projects which have just come to an end actually. And we had, for example, a joint event at the Intersolar Conference in 2018. And we also had a joint policy conference before the lockdown in November in Brussels. Regarding the market impact and socio-economic impact, with our project, we are contributing to a smoother transition from a subsidized deployment to market conditions, and we're accelerating and empowering citizen engagement with renewable energy. Regarding the energy and environmental impact, we're also contributing to the increase of share of renewable energy in the EU energy mix, and of course, contributing to reduce CO2 emissions. And last but not least, we're also shortening the somewhat expensive learning curve for making this energy transition in society possible. It's been an extremely valuable exchange of information. Next slide, please. Next slide, yep. Before I close, I'd just like to leave you with some concluding remarks. Could it be that there are no more heroes? Could it be we don't need another hero, or do we? Or could it be that with the right legislation in place, with a level and equal playing field, with increased public acceptance, we could all be heroes and contribute to a cleaner, greener, and brighter future? We believe that the growth in energy communities and citizen engagement in renewable energy will help pave the way towards a low carbon energy society. And on that note, I would like to pass the floor to Moritz from Dana to tell you more about the stakeholder engagement in the project. And please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat function, as Michael mentioned at the beginning. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar for the project EU Heroes. My name is Moritz Robers. I'm from Germany, working for the German Energy Agency, the DENA, and I'm going to talk about Work Package 2, which is called Stakeholder Engagement. And I'm briefly going to present you the main objectives and tools of our Work Package 2. And I'm going to give you at the end a small insight about what were the most interesting results from the stakeholder engagement. Next slide, please. Yes. Basically, stakeholder engagement, the Work Package 2, is, as you could see earlier in the graph from my colleague Rebecca, is, so to say, added to the entire project as being the main element of validating certain project results with the energy community and electricity network sectors. So basically, what we in our work package and also together with the consortium did is we made up our mind about how to engage in every certain country, in every respective country, how to engage the stakeholders that are involved in energy communities. And as a first step, we did a so-called stakeholder mapping, where each country identified stakeholders that, as the name already says, that have stakes in working together with, or that are dealing as, for example, network operators with energy communities. And the second step was basically implementing the 4 tools that that the project gave us, and these were the thematic workshops, the seminars, the bilateral working meetings, and the telephone conferences. The thematic workshops had the aim that every 6 months we would come together in a new country of the consortium with local stakeholders. So, for example, we met in Madrid, Spain, Athens, Greece, Vilnius, Lithuania, and Swansea, UK, where we also invited stakeholders to a physical workshop. And it was all about validating our business models, checking upon their view about, for example, pilot monitoring and evaluation. And I'm going to show you some barriers and results that we've came across in the next slide. I'm going to talk about the next slide, but please go back. Yeah, sorry, my bad. The second tool was basically the seminars, which were meant to be on a national basis. So each country did 2 seminars with the national stakeholder group, where we also validated, for example, the tool, where we talked about the pilot cases that each country had, and showed them our approach to assessing the PV cases. And then on a more frequently basis, for an ongoing exchange process, of course, we also did bilateral working meetings with certain stakeholders. We did telephone conferences also to acquire in the first place the PV business cases. And those were also meant to be on a shorter term basis, yeah, to interact with them and also get more input, because this is, I guess, what made the project so special or so valuable, that we were in different countries across Europe. We were in an ongoing exchange process with many stakeholders that gave us valuable insights about the barriers and possible solutions to those barriers in terms of in regard to energy communities in the PV area. Next slide, please. Those were the thematic workshops that I just talked about. As you can see here, we did one in Athens, where I think we had more than 20 attendees from different sectors, grid operators, participants from energy utility companies, but also representatives from the political sector. And there we heard different presentations about business models, and also what was very, very valuable for us was a presentation where we exchanged our views. And here, one of the main points that stuck in my head was that in Greece they have still pretty big issues with financing PV projects. So this was one of the main problems. And then, yeah, probably given the special situation with many small islands and many microgrids in Greece, of course, there was also an issue about setting up microgrids, and also linked to the financial side, having no financial incentives for microgrids. One of the ideas that we had that is also possible within the frame of the European idea, so to say, is set up funds or grants for easier finance conditions, which is already done in certain European projects, and then also change certain aspects of the regulatory frameworks, so to say, provide incentives for reducing the grid cost. This is just one exemplary finding from Athens in Spain. I'm not going to go into details. We have many more aspects, and we had very, very interesting discussions, which we are going to write down in our final policy recommendations. But just to give you a small overview, in Spain, there was just passed, I think it was in September 2019, when we had our thematic workshop there. Recently, before that, the royal decree was passed, which gave a pretty good basis for self-consumption and for the development of self-consumption. And basically, it was seen as very positive from associations, from utility representatives that were part in our workshop. But everybody was also aware of a general mismatch of information, so to say. The financial, the technical foundations, they are all present now in Spain, but now it just needs to be disseminated to the stakeholders, to the end users in Spain. And yeah, this was one of the ideas that we had there. Next slide, please. We basically did the same in Swansea, UK, and in Vilnius, Lithuania, with different topics in each country. In Spain, for example, in Swansea, one of the problems was the access to land and buildings, find financially viable projects, and also about organizing permits. Apparently, a lot of bureaucracy, and yes, one of the possible solutions there that we came up with was certainly making the framework easier, create also a framework that makes it possible to connect on-site users with the generation side, and also maybe create demonstration projects on communal buildings, and making a first step ahead. In Vilnius, it was very interesting because the idea of energy communities is not very present, and not very widespread. Whereas in Germany or in Holland, we already have associations that are representing energy communities also on a political level. We couldn't witness this sort of political influence in Vilnius or in Lithuania. Also there we found a lack of financing mechanisms, but what was very interesting, that was a very good idea in the idea finding about possible solutions, because in Lithuania it's very widespread to use multifamily houses, and this could be seen as a possible approach to foster the idea of energy communities in using those multifamily houses in combination with setting up funds, grants, and making the financing environment more easier or more suitable for energy communities. And basically, this is the small insight to our stakeholder engagement process, linked with a few policy recommendations that are going to be talked about within the next presentations from my colleagues. So I'm going to close my presentation now and wish you all the best for the further webinar. And I'm going to see you later in the discussion.
Thank you, Moritz. If we could just have the next presentation, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear, Vangelis.
Yes. Hello, this is Vangelis Mathas. I'm an engineer at the Center of Renewable Energy Sources in Greece, Athens. And we've been involved with the Work Package 3, as we heard earlier. It's one of the work packages of a more, let's say, technical character. It's called System Design, Monitoring, and Evaluation. And I will briefly describe the work that has been done within this work package, and hopefully the link try to explain with the other work packages. So next slide, please. So in this work package, we studied 11 PV projects, 11 PV case studies, ranging from 6.6 kilowatts, the smaller one, to 1.6 megawatts, the bigger one. They were analyzed, focused either on an operational PV energy communities or as a PV system, which might be an important ingredient of a current or future PV energy communities. So having a look at these little pictures here, You see that these are 11 case studies from 7 countries. The first one in Greece, the bigger one in terms of size, 1.6 megawatts, is a multifunctional arts education entertainment complex. The second one is placed in a monastery. It's a hybrid PV community placed in a monastery in northern Greece in Mount Athens, where due to the size of the system, sometimes the PV production is falling under curtailed operation. Then we have 2 residential complex PV communities in Holland, 2 primary schools, 1 in Spain, 1 in England, 1 community enterprise center in England, 1 feed-in tariff PV system, which can be also considered as a virtual energy community in Lithuania, 1 industrial smart grid installation in Spain, a passive house again in Lithuania, and an NZEB house in Poland. So what has been done for these 11 case studies we can start seeing at the next slide, please. There we have 7 country reports, where in each country report you can find the relevant case studies. So there are 7 reports for 11 case studies. And these give a detailed technical description of each case study together with a characteristic monthly performance data. These reports were made possible due to data from these case studies being available to us here in CRES. So even up to now, they are being updated, and the last updated version will be uploaded soon. So for the time being, you can find actually these reports in the website of the project. Next slide, please. For these reports, so we have calculated performance indicators, what they are called indices. So the most relevant performance of these performance indicators for each of these case studies are the final yield index, the self-sufficiency index, the self-consumption index, the capacity utilization index, the PV's injection, and the PV's exploitation index. You can see the graphs as they are shown in the reports as well. Next slide, please. Also, the transaction between the output and the PV studies and the local distribution network studies using typical daily profiles. These energy transactions were modeled in terms of typical daily profiles, where such a profile illustrates the average hourly values of the energy transactions for the total days of a month. So you can see in these graphs the monthly curves for a system, for the total produced PV energy, for the total electrical consumption, for the injected PV energy, and of course for the self-consumed PV energy. Next slide, please. At the same time, all power quantities were reported in the frame of a well-defined per unit system. And the main idea of that was to eliminate differences in absolute values into base correlations. So PV's nominal power consisting the base value of the system, and the rest power quantities are specified as multiples of the selected base value. Here you can see in the first graph of a typical hourly allocation of the total electricity consumption for March, for example, and another one, the hourly production broken down by component, that there is quite a large period of the day where the production of the PV system is higher than the actual consumption of the house or the building that is installed. And there are time intervals where these PV energy needs were served by PVs at percentages of more than 70%. And also there were time intervals where the injected PV energy corresponds at least to 70% of the produced power. Next slide, please. The outcomes of these typical day profiles is that in these residential PV applications, most of the electrical needs can be furnished by installing small-scale decentralized PV systems. The maximum hourly values of the produced PV power is at most equal to 70% of the nominal PV capacity. The maximum value of the understudy building's power consumption is usually less than 60% of the nominal PV capacity. Important to note that maximum values of PV's production and buildings consumption take place at different times, and this is really where the idea of energy storage comes in. We will see that at a much later slide. Power consumption varies between 5 and 35% of the nominal PV capacity at the time where the maximum PV production is exploited. Mean self-consumption ratio of residential PV application ranges between 30 and 35%. And of course, there are time intervals where the energy needs of all PV case studies were covered by the PVs in high rates, for some of them almost around 100%. And this happens as expected, particularly during spring and summer periods. Next slide, please. Smart grid services is the next thing that comes in mind. These have been sought in order to reduce the peaks in energy transaction between PV case studies and the load distribution network, and of course, in order to maximize the local consumption of the produced energy. The main scope of these smart grid services is to enable consumers and producers to participate in grid management and to improve the operation of the entire energy production, transmission and distribution chain in reliable and economic terms. Demand response, of course, comes into mind, and distributed energy storage systems were deemed as the most appropriate smart grid services for the understudy PV projects. Demand response motivates consumers to modify their electrical consumption profile, something very important in these studies, in these cases with PV installations. And distributed energy storage systems stabilize the production of intermittent gas, which is the case with PVs as well. Next slide, please. So demand response is a valuable tool that could have a potential impact at demand profile, either by reducing or shifting consumers' electrical usage during peak periods, or by motivating consumers to modify their electrical consumption profile according to the availability of the rest production. In this respect, consumers should be remunerated either for their demand response availability, following a contracted time-based rate in official peak rebates, or for the procurement of the service. That can be done by following variable peak pricing or real-time pricing and time-of-use pricing. Sometimes it also includes the direct control of air conditioner, heat pumps units, water heaters from the aggregators. This is done, of course, usually during periods of peak demand or peak rest production. The EU Heores consortium did not have a detailed picture of electricity consumption. We had only data from the PV production side of it, not really of the consumption of these buildings. And thus the impact from the application of such a demand response analysis could not be quantified. Next slide, please. So the next thing that comes into mind with these intermittent systems, production systems, is the distributed energy storage. These into interconnected PV systems can contribute to really mitigate concerns arising from the intermittent nature of photovoltaic systems. Starting by taking the price of battery storage from Bloomberg's Energy Finance, it is seen that prices of lithium-ion batteries fell from 85% from 2010 to 2018, reaching a price of $176 per kilowatt hour. That's wholesale price. And according to the same survey, the cost of energy storage is expected to fall roughly another 52% through 2030, reaching the price of $85 per kilowatt hour. So under the EU Heores program, such a distributed energy storage systems can be regarded to be either behind the meter or behind the meter, the common coupling point in the case of a building complex on energy communities of very limited geographical area. Next slide, please. So the outcomes from the addition of an energy storage system is that it does not only increase the self-consumption of locally generated clean electricity, but also it provides ancillary services to distributed networks. It absorbs PV energy, either from local produced PV energy or from neighboring PV installations that haven't got storage facilities at midday hours with high radiation and low electrical loads, and injecting back to the grid at hours where the electrical energy demand is high. In this way, peaks in energy transactions between PV case studies and grid can be reduced, and the profitability of the PV's owners can be increased. The proposed price charging of the above-mentioned ancillary services, which is almost at half of the competitive energy tariff, offsets the cost of adding energy storage and prevents any increase in time required to recoup the investment. To see an example of this, next slide, please. We calculated the economic viability of such an energy storage for the case study of Poland. That was the NZEP house, if you remember. It has an annual electrical consumption of 9.4 megawatt hours, and the measured annual produced PV energy was 10.4 megawatt hours. So we see that we have a really NZEP situation here. And we used the average price of the energy storage. If you remember, it was $167 or so per kilowatt hour, down to $85 in 30 years, as far as this is what Bloomberg estimated. So we used an average value of $100 per kilowatt hour wholesale battery, lithium battery. And we can see that in the current situation, the first case, the capital expenditure is just under 10,000 euros. And with the addition of 10 kilowatt hours of storage, it goes up to 11,000 euros. That's about 1,000 euros for the storage. And if we add even more storage, let's say 15 kilowatt hours, it rises to 11,625 euros. You can see the payback periods which are very similar for all cases, taking in mind that the competitive charges are 11 cents and the regulated charges for transmission and distributed grid charges, that is about 30% on the competitive charges. So if we have ancillary services tariff without VAT, a mitigation of grid congestion services of 5 cents could make really sense in order to proceed with an energy storage system for such a case. And this is the end of the presentation, I think. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention. All the reports and the calculations can be found in the website of the project, and we are open for any question and discussion later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vangelis. And if we could have the next presentation from Andrea, please.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Andrea Real. I am a consultant at Creara. I'm sorry I can't turn off my camera, but it's okay, you're really not going to miss much. And I am going to be presenting the fourth work package of the EU Heores project, which is the business model adaptation and development and training. Next slide, please. So basically, we set out 4 main objectives in this work package. The first one being to provide a clear business model description for the case study project, which Vangelis presented earlier. And that also included a country level context analysis. Then we also wanted to integrate technical data into an economical analysis, including societal costs and cost per grid operators. And to do this, we designed a financial model, which allows you to evaluate different business models and what their different combinations may mean in terms of economic and grid impact results. Then we identified and evaluated potential improvements for the case study projects, again, using the financial tool. And finally, we wanted to provide some conclusions considered to be good practices, sort of using everything we learned from earlier deliverables and work packages. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did, as I mentioned, was to conduct a context analysis about the situation and the potential for development of national PV markets. And in it, we looked at the overall context for PV projects in the consortium countries, and we covered technical, financial, economic, and regulatory data, which would then later on serve as to, first of all, design the business model tool and also really know what can work in the different markets. Next slide, please. In that same deliverable, we also defined the different business models, of the different case study projects. And we presented definitions and general structures of what are really the realities of PV plans and models in our countries, and sort of what the generic business cases of the PV systems are that can be found throughout Europe. And some of the most relevant variables or characteristics that we analyzed were whether or not the plants were connected to the grid, if curtailment took place or not, if there was injection, and whether or not there were benefits from the grid, whether that was in the form of feed-in tariffs, net metering, net billing, etc. Next slide, please. And then in order to sort of try to optimize or analyze the effects of combining different business models, on community PV cases, we designed a tool to allow community groups to sort of quickly undertake economic analysis of potential community PV projects and to explore some of the options that can influence the viability of such projects. And as you can see on the slide, we've tried to sort of simplify the tool as much as we can so that it can be used by the general public and by even those that are not so involved in the sector. So basically the tool has several tabs, many of which are input tabs in which the user can introduce well, the most relevant variables and characteristics about their system. So that's a brief description, the cause, whether there are funding schemes, and also play with the different business models to see the effect on an economic, on the income, the economic impact, pardon, and as well as the impact on the grid. And one of the sort of characteristics that makes this tool a bit different is that it allows you to enter your generation and consumption profiles in order to combining both automatically give you a self-consumption rate, which will then allow you to see what different business models combinations you can take to improve that. And then as outputs, there are two tabs. One is the economic output that analyzes, well, the relevant variables such as the net present value, IRR, etc. And then there is also a very interesting tab, in my opinion, which is the sensitivity analysis, which allows you to sort of play with variables such as the price of electricity or cost of PPA, etc., and see what escalations or decreases in those prices, what the impact of that would be on the overall economic results of the projects. And so using the economic tool, what we did was take the base cases for the case study projects and then apply different business models to sort of see what the impact of that would be. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just a very brief sort of condensed look at what the tool allows you to do and what the input would be. If you want to take a look at the tool, it is available for download in combination with a manual on the EU Heores tab. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, some of the main goal of this tool is to see what the impact of the combination of the business models would be, and some of those business models that we included in the tool are PPAs, feed-in tariffs, so you can play with the rates that are included in that. We also included the option of adding storage, adding a charging station for electric vehicles, just really anything that we thought would really allow users to maximize their self-consumption rate, minimize grid injection, and also maximize their economic benefits that come from the implementation of such projects. And then the last thing we did was we sort of piled up all the information that we had from the different case studies, and we made short fact sheets about what we thought the benefits or the good impacts of the business model combinations were. And if I am not mistaken, that is also available on our website. Next slide, please. And that's it on my part. Thank you very much for your attention.
very much, Andrea. And obviously on the slide there, you can see Andrea to find out more. Okay, if we could have our next presentation, please.
Okay, good morning to everyone. It's Juras Sulbikas from Protech. We are leading this work package, and this work package is starting in the month 13 and ends with the end of the project. It is dedicated to piloting of business model cases. Next slide, please. Okay, this work package is mainly dealing with demonstration of our project results in real environment, like in different other projects. We are demonstrating our achievements with the possibility to show impact of these tools on, let's say, projects which are developed by community project developers and owners. Okay, next slide, please. We have 3 tasks, which 2 of them are dealing with tool piloting and evaluation. Task point 1 to propose design for specific community and municipal pilot projects, and task point 2 is to monitor and evaluate effectiveness of the pilot approaches. One task, the last task, 5.3, is dedicated to the training for communities, pilot project managers and technicians, hands-on, let's say, experience on how to use a tool. Next slide, please. So far, we analyzed 5 pilot cases from Greece, Spain, Poland, Netherlands, and Lithuania. Greece, it was so-called Hyperion Innovative PV Energy Community Project, providing distributed ownership of the community solar system. Spain, Valencia Administrative Complex with a total area of 35,000 square meters. Poland, municipality-owned public kindergarten with PVs. Netherlands, Groningen Social Ecological Housing Project, consists of 33 private homes. And Lithuania, Varni Greenhouse, for renewable energy-based refurbishment of Soviet-style multifamily house to the modern zero-emission entity. 2 more cases are coming up, and we hope to have 7 cases from each of the partnering countries by the end of the project. Next slide, please. We have 3 deliverables which will be available for wide public. A report on pilot model business cases, training materials for community PV plants operators, and seminar reports. Seminars which will be held in each country, dealing with presentation of tool application. Next slide, please. Okay, what I can say about, let's say, outcomes of this work package. Actually, when we were trying to apply a model, as you see, in very wide variety of situations, it appears that it is applicable for very different cases, and can be adaptable to different projects, community or public-based. Well, it's also clear that it is simple enough to understand. We reached our target, how it was said from previous presentation, that even unexperienced project developers can use this tool with, let's say, with easiness, and to get required information from it. What it gives to owners, to developers. First of all, it is helping to understand what outcomes are coming from existing configuration of proposed project. And to my understanding, the highest value of these tools are possibility to analyze impact of infrastructure configuration modification. It means you can add storage or other kind of generation or consumption, and to have immediate answer what impact on business case outcomes you are getting from this tool, from these changes. Therefore, I think that we developed quite a useful tool for prosumers communities, and I hope this tool will be useful for many of communities all around Europe, because it is, let's say, having a wide possibility also to adapt to local legal situation, which is varying from country to country to a very large extent. Looks like it is all I have to say about this work package. I will wait for questions if you have for work package 5 in the end of all presentations. Thank you.
US.
Thanks.
So finally, yes, just coming in now. So yes, Graham, we hand it to you.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Graham Ayling from Energy Saving Trust in the UK. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the dissemination work that we're doing, but also the policy recommendations, because we didn't originally set this project up as a kind of policy-based project, but in discussion with our contacts at the Commission, it was felt that it would be really useful for us to produce some policy recommendations. And I think it's kind of become an increasingly important part of the project as well. Could we have the next slide, please? So on the dissemination side of the work, we're doing a lot of the things that you would expect from a European partnership project. These webinars obviously would have been events had the world been a different place right now. So we are now, we're doing our dissemination through a series of 3 webinars. This is the first one. There's another one next week on the 8th of July, which will focus particularly in more detail on the policy side of the project. And then on the 15th of July, the week after, we're then going to focus in a little bit more on the practicalities of actually delivering solar communities. So both of those webinars will have a little bit more in the way of case studies of that from the real world that are kind of practical. So the one on the 8th will have case studies of examples of policies and practices that could potentially be replicated elsewhere, and the one on the 15th of July will have case studies of some kind of innovative and interesting applications of community PV. We're also doing all the usual things with kind of articles and presentations in publications, and then the website you've already heard about a little bit is one of our other main tools. Go to the next slide, please. And the web address is euheores.eu, so nice and simple. And there we have a little bit more information about the case studies that we've worked with. We have some news items. You can register for the other webinars on the website. No doubt many of you use that to register for today. And we're also putting some of the project outputs there, the reports that are coming out of the project. And importantly, that's where you can download the Excel-based tool that Andrea and Uras have been talking about. Next slide, please. So then the other side of what we're doing is we're active on social media. So follow us on Twitter at EU Heores, or you can use that as a hashtag if you want to, by all means. And building a network there, and then we're also active on LinkedIn and have a group there. So if you want to continue the discussion, then we can do that there. Next slide, please. So I was going to talk a little bit more about the policy recommendations for most of my presentation. Obviously, the context behind this, I'm sure many of you are aware of Article 22 in the Renewable Energy Directive, which kind of enshrines the right to set up renewable energy communities across EU. And there's actually quite a lot in it, although obviously it's a high level directive for the whole of the EU, but it does deal with things like communities being treated fairly by the market, which could be really, really important. There's a number of member states where that sort of thing has been an issue. And so it's really interesting to see how this is kind of being implemented across Europe. And where we've started in the policy recommendations is trying to actually understand energy communities as well as possible. Part of the concept behind the project overall was for us to work with network operators to understand their challenges of connecting PV and understand the challenges that creates for energy communities and how it can impact their business model and their ability to operate, really. And then try to kind of improve the communication there or find examples of where that communication has worked well and share those. And I think obviously the first thing that we've recognized is that energy communities are not all the same. There is a lot of variation, not just between the member states, but also within the member states, and a lot of different kinds of applications. Article 22 does a good job of providing a kind of basic definition of what energy communities are, but obviously the actual implementation of that varies a lot. And so one of the things that we've done to try to kind of recognize that and deal with it in a simple way is to look at the way that the energy communities evolve. And we've kind of separated that into 3 stages. The first stage being the pioneering stage, when energy communities are getting set up, putting their governance in place, but then also then delivering their first renewable energy project, usually, sometimes energy efficiency. And that's kind of the first stage, is actually getting that first project on the ground. Stage 2 is those organizations developing. They've now got an income stream, so they can start to reinvest some of that potentially in their kind of social, environmental, economic priorities, potentially also in staff, and starting to professionalize. And through this second stage, some of those organizations then start to get a portfolio of projects. So, a number of different renewable energy projects generating. And then the third stage is kind of the big prize that's on the horizon of this kind of paradigm shift, and what is the role that energy communities can play in bringing about the kind of smart, flexible, zero carbon future that we need, and kind of recognizing that actually this is a sector, and these are kind of vehicles that could do a really good job of being a local trusted actor that brings together the kinds of interests that we need to do that. Next slide, please. So with the policy recommendations, we've kind of divided them into two parts. The first part being the immediate priorities of how the sector can build capacity right now. So this is thinking about energy communities that are at stage 1 and 2, the pioneering and developing stages. And we think, you'll have heard just now from Evangelis and from Juras about the findings of the project around on-site utilization of PV, and we think that there's a really important recommendation that could come out of this, which is around the public sector in particular, recognizing the opportunity for energy communities to deliver renewable energy services to the public sector. So to have a community-owned PV array on a local public building, selling electricity direct to that building, which then enables obviously a better price for the electricity because they're kind of competing with the retail price. There's an opportunity that you could have a long-term power purchase agreement that would really help access to finance for energy communities. And there are examples of this. We are going to get some in our webinar on the 15th. Examples of where this has worked, but at the minute we're in a little bit of a phase that it's quite difficult to really kind of scale up and replicate that because it takes a lot of work to get things like a roof lease in place and to agree the power purchase agreement and all of these kinds of things. I think, could there be policies that come in that actually start to normalize this approach? And we've heard about some work going on in Lithuania to actually kind of require municipalities to identify sites for this. There's an example in the UK where this is happening voluntarily. It's not happening officially, but there's a non-profit organization that is linking up site owners with energy communities. So we think that is a really important immediate thing that could be done to really help the sector start to scale up, build its capacity, deliver more real projects on the ground. And then behind that, we need the consistency of support frameworks, which Article 22 is really starting to do. One of the things that's been really interesting about the project is seeing the member states that are working on this. So there is an aspect in there that is about actually providing a supportive framework for energy communities, and we think that's really important because it isn't an easy thing to do, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So having access to expert support and possibly grants for early stage development, low cost loans for later stage development can be really, really helpful in all of this, as well as kind of tools and online information, and also experience sharing. That's something that's been really effective within energy communities, particularly where they share experience with each other and share their models with each other. And we also highlighted the value of there being some kind of targeted support for PV battery combo systems. Next slide, please. So then the second stage that we're thinking about is how can we bring about that paradigm shift? And obviously part of the complexity there is that this is all tied up with changes to energy regulation to enable the smart, flexible, decentralized future. And so in some countries, this is moving really quickly. In some countries, it's going to take time for that regulation to kind of bed in. But we think there's a real value in recognizing the potential role that energy communities could play in achieving net zero, in engaging citizens, in bringing people with us with these big changes that have to happen, but also in kind of being a local actor to help coordinate, bring together different stakeholders to deliver these things that might involve using waste heat from a business, or having a kind of local aggregator for low carbon assets and local flexibility markets, all of these kinds of things, and enabling local supply. So we are talking a little bit about that as well, and also I guess in the background kind of having some kind of long-term certainty on the policy framework so that people can get the confidence to access finance to deliver this. And then the last point that we're talking about a little bit is the wider influence that energy communities can have. So potentially kind of influence on the private sector or working with the private sector, for example, on shared ownership. So communities being able to buy 10%, 25%, 50% of a commercial PV array, And also just, I guess, the influence that energy communities are having on private sector offerings as well, that there are private sector companies out there that are starting to either work with energy communities or to try to do some of the similar kind of ethical mission driven things that energy communities are doing. And next slide, please. So the last thing I was going to say on policy recommendations is, I think that the other thing that we're trying to highlight is that actually there's a kind of good practice jigsaw out there, that we've identified a bunch of really interesting, really good policies within different countries and good practice. But it kind of feels like no one yet has the whole picture. And obviously the whole picture might vary from one member state to another. So this is part of what we want to do in the webinar on the 8th, is just highlight some of these examples of good practice and perhaps talk a little bit about how they could fit together. So, you know, in Greece, there's a really interesting policy around virtual net metering for communities. I mentioned Lithuania has this policy of getting local authorities, municipalities to identify sites for community PV. So some examples of where there's really good work going on the kind of creation of the market for energy communities. And in the UK, you know, we've got a good example from Welsh Government's support programme for energy communities. Scottish Government has a similar programme which provides access to expert support and help right the way through the development of projects, and has done over the years, and is evolving into a kind of more professionalised scheme. But could you piece together the support for actually energy communities setting up with the creation of that market, and then you start to have something really powerful that could really lead to growth in the sector. So that was a little bit of a gallop through the policy recommendations, because we'll go into more detail in that on the 8th. Next slide, please. So that's the end of my formal presentation. We are going to have a brief 10-minute break, give you all a chance to have a comfort break, have a cup of coffee, and also just have a think about what questions you have, because we'd really like to hear from you in the second part of this webinar. We want to kind of answer some of your questions, we want to hear your comments, because we're still keen. So we're still in the process of kind of writing up the policy recommendations, and we're really keen to hear more from anyone else. So we'd really like to get your input. So you put those in the Q&A tab, and feel free to start doing that now. We're looking in the tab there, and then do that as we go. And we've got a couple of framing questions to start the discussion. Next slide, please. Actually, so we're just going to kind of leave you this slide, which gives you the information on the next couple of webinars. If we could come back together at 11:55, does that sound okay? So we'll just go on mute, give you 10 minutes, get up, have a walk around. We know long webinars can be challenging, so just give you time for a little break, catch your breath, and then we'll reconvene at 11:55 and try and get started at 12. Great, thanks everyone. Okay, thanks everyone. Give people a couple of minutes to come back from getting a coffee or having a comfort break. But just to say, if you have questions or comments, post those in the Q&A tab, which you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little arrow you can, kind of downwards arrow, you can click to open that up. So please do add any comments and questions that you have on there. I was just going to start off with a couple of questions for my colleagues on EU Heroes, just to kind of kick off the discussion. So I think, I guess thinking back to what I was talking about on how the policy recommendations work, and thinking about the immediate opportunities and then the longer term opportunities. Be interested to hear from everybody. To begin with, what do you think are the key opportunities for energy communities in 2020? So kind of right now, the immediate opportunities. If anyone wants to come in and just unmute yourselves and join in the discussion. So I think for me, it's certainly, you know, as I said in my presentation, I think it's that opportunity for power purchase agreements, particularly on public sector buildings, I think, because there's an opportunity there to do that at a large scale if policy came down from a national level. That's certainly the opportunity that energy communities in the UK are looking at, and some have had success with it. But as I said, it's then trying to scale that up and repeat the model, because the model, you know, it really works if you get a building owner that understands what an energy community is trying to achieve and kind of values the outcomes from that. There's some really good examples of projects, and some that we've worked with on EU Heroes that are doing really interesting things. So that's the thing for us. I mean, I know some of the other partners were looking at kind of multi-family households. I don't know if anybody wants to come in on that.
Hi, this is Rebecca speaking. Yeah, maybe it's nice to hear from some of the other countries as well. So we'd like to invite all the partners here to respond. So maybe we could start with Greece. Vangelis, what do you think are the key opportunities for energy communities right now in 2020?
Hi, can you hear me now? Well, mainly due to the financial crisis, and if that was not enough, we have the COVID case now. There are obstacles mainly to do with financing, even though the legal framework is quite clear as far as energy communities are concerned in virtual energy metering. There are many obstacles. Obstacles that need to be fought in order to make life easier for energy poverty. And apart from financing, the permitting procedures are not very, let's say, clear. Well, they are clear, but they are very, they involve a lot of paperwork. So even though everything is here in terms of the legal framework and what can be done and how it is to be done, the financing mechanisms are not here, and investment capital is not interested very much in these new opportunity right now as we speak. Let's say that after a year or so, where this drawback with the COVID is something of the past, things will start up again, because we have some energy communities that have started a couple of years ago, but now this new situation has given them a stall.
Thank you, Vangelis. I'd like to pass the floor to Otto in the Netherlands. Do you recognise these same kind of obstacles in the Netherlands?
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, thanks. I yes and no, in the sense that I agree completely with Vangelis, but the circumstances in the Netherlands are different. Also, the philosophy is that there are sufficient financial means, especially for solar parks in the commercial sector. So there you have the issue that government and also the solar sector itself does not really focus on the population that does not have the means. So I don't think we're in the same situation as Greece, although there were many homeowners in Greece with some means, etc. But in the Netherlands, you have also a large group, say 1/3 of the population, that do not have the means for investing in renewable energy, whatever. And that's not a problem at this, especially now, because we do have large investments in solar, but it's becoming more urgent every year, in the sense that there's a divide in the population of the happy few and large multinationals who are investing in solar parks in the Netherlands, pension funds from all over the world. And that friction is going to increase. So that's a different context, but it's the same conclusion as Vangelis drew. It's very important to have the cost and the benefits at the same local place, and you will avoid a lot of social upheaval and disequality and even poverty. So yes, that would be my answer. The situation is different in the Netherlands, but it applies to a large part also of our population.
Thank you, Otto. I'd like to invite our Polish colleagues, so Piotr and Ryszard, if you could give us a bit of insight into the situation in Poland. The same as the Netherlands, or?
Yes. Hello, everybody. This is Piotr, representing the Polish National Energy Conservation Agency, CAPE. And at first, referring to the initial question that Graham asked about the creation of opportunities, if we talk about energy communities, to me, I think this kind of cooperation creates a platform for cooperation for many entities on the local or regional level. So this also creates an opportunity to create energy self-sufficient municipalities, sometimes regions, and this type of entity, energy community, can create also a great opportunity for mixing different technologies in order to balance energy demand and energy production. So, of course, PV technology plays a very relevant role in this field, and as my colleague said, this can contribute to local development as well also, and in Poland, what we can say, energy communities, we started our approach from energy clusters, but this initiative was too much flexible, not well structured in terms of law. And nowadays we are starting with energy cooperatives, which have more power in terms of legal framework. And these entities can use the same system as prosumers, net metering, but with different percentage of energy that they can obtain from the grid. But initially the scheme is pretty much the same, and this is the main driver for development of energy communities in Poland nowadays.
Thank you very much, Piotr. I'd like to move to Germany now, to Moritz. What are the key opportunities for energy communities right now in Germany?
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Can you hear me? I think it should be audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. It has a lot of different dimensions, so to say. And I'd like to start with an aspect that was and is still pretty present in Germany, I guess, where the participation in the energy transition is very, very vital and very wanted also by the political level. And it's all about different actors, inhabitants from Germany participating in the process of energy transition. And it should not also only be for energy utilities. And this is why the energy transition can and should be a decentralized approach where all people participate, but also contribute. And this is why energy communities are an essential and vital tool to make what I just said happen, because energy communities make it possible that large parts of the community, of the country community, also of the inhabitants, can participate in the energy transition. And it's also a political process. In a democracy, it is very, very important to involve the entire population and to explain them what we are trying to do and how we are becoming climate neutral until 2050, and what tools and what possibilities we have. And this is why not only Germany, but also the EU identified energy communities as a very, very important tool to include basically all the people. And in the first stage in Germany, many owners of houses had the possibility to install PV installations on their roof. But now with including or with fostering energy communities, we're trying to make also larger parts that are not maybe that well off to include into the energy transition. And in the first step, so this is the one dimension of energy communities, it makes it widely accessible for the population. So this is one of the big key communities. And then the second dimension, I'd say, is, I mean, I'm talking for Germany right now. In Germany, there is right now around about 50 gigawatts of PV installed. This is a huge number already. Thinking about the fact that in the old energy world, I think there was 100 gigawatts installed of fossil generation capacity, and now we have more or less 200 gigawatts entirely installed with all the renewables, and 50 gigawatts is PV. And now one of the big obstacles is how can we also efficiently use this capacity? So how can we make the communities, the energy communities, and also the decentralized users efficiently use these highly volatile energy capacity? And this is why we need to address in a second stage the regulatory framework, what is also trying to be done with the RED2. So the second step would be to make it possible for collective self-sufficiency, that energy community is able to use the energy they created or they generated collectively. And so these are the two dimensions that I want to talk about. First, it's about expansion of renewables, of PV. And then once that is done, once you have a more elaborated market, it's about using it efficiently, as also Vangelis explains in his presentation. It's about demand side management. It's about distributed storage capacity. And this is what is aimed at with the regulatory framework in the RED2. And this gives us the second key opportunity for community PV. So yeah, this is what I wanted to say about the German market so far.
Thank you, Moritz. Can we now move to Spain, Andrea?
Hi. Yeah.
Similarities in Spain.
I hope you can hear me. So I think in Spain, well, the first opportunity is sort of very related to what Moritz spoke about, and I think it's pretty generalized across all Europe, and it's just giving consumers sort of the option to take control and responsibility in terms of their self-sufficiency and their energy needs, and also that allows them to or allows for the promotion of energy democracy within the community. But then I also think, and this might be a bit different, that in Spain there is, well, because we had a relatively restrictive regulation up until about a year and a half ago, we only just started dipping our toe in self-consumption with the changes that occurred in the regulation in 2018 and 19. And within that, the access to collective self-consumption was made more reasonable and in a way easier. It is still a very complex concept. But within that, there's still the fact that more complex forms of community PV are still sort of undiscovered by the generalized public in Spain. So I think it's not so much about the promotion of the community plans themselves, but there is an opportunity that really lies in overcoming the existing barriers, which are very much intertwined and related to the lack of knowledge about so many concepts within the self-consumption and community PV realm. And yeah, and that will also help sort of tackle other issues or opportunities that were mentioned by Otto and Vangelis regarding financing, which is obviously a very big hurdle right now, basically across all Europe, but in Spain, it is very evident as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. And now I'd like to move to Lithuania then, to Heures.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Well, in Lithuania, Well, situation, to my opinion, is really very good for prosumer communities, finance communities. But I would like to invite you to the next our webinar on 8th of July, when my colleague Vitas will give more extended overview of the policy situation and legal situation here. Well, maybe I would like to start not from, let's say, obstacles, but from motivation. You know that Lithuania is a Nordic country. It means we have cold climate, and we have really bad situation with costs for heating of our heating and electricity during winter time. Just to mention that we inherited this, let's say, Soviet style buildings through the whole country, and it is really huge, let's say, pressure on all people pockets. It's really consuming large percentage of our income. Therefore, the first motivation, let's say, differently from Western countries where communities were created for generating profit, for Lithuania is saving costs. Therefore, when we are creating possibility that you have, let's say, somewhere PV generator on site or on building or anywhere in Lithuania, and you are consuming your own produced electricity, it's already coming with a lot of savings. Such investment in Lithuania is return of investment here is in approximately 7 years for PV plant. It's really good conditions, and adding some subsidies available for such installations, you have very nice business case. But which is even more important, and we are advocating for that. There is a possibility to move into heating sector. When heating sector is coupled with electricity, and you can, let's say, pay your heating bills from electricity generated through heat pumps, integration, and the renovation of the buildings. Therefore, well, actually, when you have such strong motivation that you will have less costs for your living, then it is very good starting point for spreading energy communities through country very quickly. Actually, we are in the beginning of this process, but it's kicking up. Okay, Rebecca, back to you.
Thank you very much, Juras. Yeah, we wanted really to open the floor to the audience to see if you experience the same kind of opportunities and barriers in your countries. Graham, do you have any questions that you could address from the chat?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a few in the Q&A. The first one was a fairly specific one. I'm happy to answer, but anyone else feel free to comment if you want to. But the question from Carol is, are you trying to quantify the impact on CO2 or collecting experience in EU Heores? And I think in an ideal world, a little bit of both, but I think it's probably fair to say that this is a project that is trying to address non-technical barriers and systemic barriers rather than directly deliver as much CO2 as possible right now. So we do have CO2 savings that we can quantify from the projects that we support, but strictly speaking, we wouldn't necessarily want to claim all the credit for those CO2, because basically what we're doing is supporting energy communities who were developing projects anyway and are having difficulty in this area. But I think what we hope the long-term impact will be is that we can share models and ways of bringing forward PV projects that will be replicable, so more people can develop viable projects, but also that we can hopefully get some changes to policy and practice and kind of improve communications between energy communities, network operators, and other stakeholders. So that was my thought on it, unless anyone else has any input. Okay, there was another very specific question, which I think is probably one for Piotr or possibly Uras, which I don't know whether you've got an immediate answer or whether we need to follow up afterwards. But Mark Anthony Callas says, thanks for the presentations. With regards to the PV battery model showed for Poland, I assume you would combine the service tariff and the competitive charges rather than have separate metering systems, one for the PV and the other for the battery system. Is that one that anyone can answer immediately? Or we can always follow up afterwards if it's difficult. Did anyone want to comment on that one? Perhaps I should take that as a no. But we can maybe follow up afterwards, or if anyone wants to follow up privately in the chat to get a kind of clarification and ask that question.
Maybe I can comment.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, actually, yes, you are correct. Actually, batteries are working in countries. Business model with batteries are working in countries where you have, let's say, on hourly basis, changes of tariff, and you can sell your energy when prices are highest, or don't need to buy it. But in countries where this is not available for now, it's not working. Okay.
Great, thanks, Uras. That's useful. So we had another question from Carol, which I could respond to, but it'd be good to get input from others then as well, because I think it highlights a few issues. So Carol says the laws on energy markets and the law on energy markets and networking is complex. It takes professionalism to set up an innovative plan. What, apart from COPs, can we offer? And I think, to me, it raises that whole issue of how energy communities professionalize and what is an appropriate role for energy communities. And I just wanted to kind of offer a couple of observations from UK, because at Energy Saving Trust we do quite a lot of work supporting energy communities through a number of different programs, particularly in Scotland and Wales with the devolved governments there. And there certainly are sometimes situations where perhaps people are expecting a bit too much of energy communities, or maybe energy communities have kind of overstretched, and it depends on the capacity of the individual energy community. But I think the really important thing to note is that certainly within UK, we have energy communities that have an incredibly high level of skill and knowledge and professionalism, the ones that are well established because actually quite a lot of these communities include people that work in the energy industry doing this in their spare time. And then some of these communities have now professionalized and now have, you know, actually in some cases quite a few full-time staff. And so I think in the UK, we have quite a lot of energy communities who are getting involved with innovation around smart grids, smart flexible approaches, all of those kinds of things. And they're not, and doing it at a professional level. So working in partnership with DSOs to do that, and with the private sector. So I think I guess it's a case of understanding the capacity of the energy communities that you're working with, and also thinking about that evolution process as well. That a energy community that's at an early stage of development, it might just need a little bit of time and some experience to then be able to develop to take some of these things on. We're not suggesting that all energy communities will necessarily, you know, suddenly become local ESCOs delivering flexibility services, but there are some energy communities that are doing it. So in the UK, we have an energy community in Manchester that's working with some government funding with, I believe they're working alongside network operators and a number of others, trying to look at could you have a local aggregator for flexibility services that would actually work right down to domestic level. So there is a lot of that kind of innovation going on, and a number of examples of people working on local direct supply as well, and working in the kind of regulator sandbox space where the regulator, you know, on specific programs will allow people to test things that would be kind of outside of the boundaries of normal regulation. So there certainly are energy communities out there that are capable of doing this. But it's obviously important to kind of recognize what stage people are at and what stage of evolution they're at.
Can I also say something?
Sure.
I think what Graham said is also pretty much right for Germany. It definitely has to do with capacity building. At the beginning, at the beginning of energy communities, it was very much a grassroots movement. It was some people sitting around a kitchen table, maybe thinking about setting up an energy community and installing PV plants. Or in Germany, it's also a big thing with wind turbines, but this is not the focus of the project. But and then over time, dealing with all the specifications, with the complexity, with the bureaucracy. There are also cases in Germany nowadays where energy communities are being pooled, and they established, so to say, a virtual utility where they sell the electricity from different energy communities to end users. And this would be a very advanced level of a market. And we've talked to these this service provider that is actually pooling the energy communities and selling the electricity to end users, and are also working then as a utility, as an energy provider. And we've talked to them within the process of stakeholder engagement. What I presented as work package 2, sorry, and they said that they are also currently offering this knowledge to other energy communities, and that they are really trying to disseminate the idea behind energy communities, and that is about participation. And this is why they also offer this knowledge as being offered in workshops. And yeah, just to give you an overview about what is going on in different countries, and this is happening in Germany already.
Thanks, Moritz. Yeah, absolutely. Did anyone else have any comments on that one? Because I think one thing to think about is, I think this is partly where that supportive framework fits in as well, because having the support for energy communities to help them to get set up, to understand, which are the ones that are serious and that have got capacity to deliver projects, and then to help them develop and evolve. I think that's kind of a really important aspect of this, because it can help energy communities to achieve their potential, whether that might be just delivering one project in their local area, or actually, evolving in some of the ways that Moritz was describing there. Yeah. Does anyone have any comments from other member states? Or I could move on.
I have one last question. I read the comment from Carol, but I'm not quite sure what COP is meant to be. Have you?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure on that. I wasn't sure whether it meant as in COP26 or something else. But
Paul just writes it's code of practice.
Code of practice. Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
But I think we still basically answered the question.
Yeah, and I think certainly the work that we do in Wales and Scotland, I think part of the value of that is that the support is kind of multi-vector. It's not just that we will give you a grant for feasibility. It's those government support programs that provide an expert on tap who will talk to you and will help you through the process. They've developed toolkits that kind of lay out the process of developing a renewables project for people, and then they also provide the kind of grants and the access to finance to develop the actual projects. So over time, all of that evolves with more learning, and because they're working closely alongside the energy communities, it means the programs can actually learn from that experience and respond to the needs of those communities, and it all just kind of helps to increase the visibility and the understanding of the actual process of developing a project, and how do you what permissions do you need, what's the kind of bureaucracy side of it, but also how do you put together a business plan that will give you access to finance. And I think all of that has been really valuable, and it also can mean, certainly for the Welsh government programme, that's just producing an annual report that has really good data on, how many megawatts went in as a result, what's the level of investment that's brought in, what are the additional benefits that are going to arise from the fact that it's community ownership and is often generating community funds. What are those funds, how big are those funds, and what are they going to do? So it means that those support programs can actually show really strong outcomes and kind of show, here's the amount of investment that was brought in from this amount of government investment, if you like.
And it's also, maybe one more remark, it's not that there is one size fits all solution where we could just say, why don't we just implement this policy, and then every single market in the EU would have a very elaborated framework for energy communities. It's every regulatory framework in each respective country is very different, and is at a very different stage of development. So this is why we think that each country has to find its own best path or best way. And if you say that you want, or if you, as you said rightly, it's all about professionalism, then you have to think about, okay, how can you reach professionalism? It's about experience, and how can you reach experience? It's about doing first demonstration projects in most of the markets. It's basically the same with the energy transition. It's not that we reached the point of energy transition just within a few years. It took basically more than 10, 15 years to come at this stage where everybody has gathered enough knowledge and information about how to also combine different sectors, different technologies. And this is why I think it's very important to find tailored solution to each development of the market. And this is what we're also trying to do with the policy recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Moritz. That makes sense. I've just seen Carol's response that it was community of practice, but I think there's maybe those kind of three components. One is the actual support to develop. One is having the framework that creates the opportunity for a business model, whether that in the past that might have been feed-in tariffs, in future it might be more around virtual net metering or on-site delivery via a power purchase agreement, and then a community of practice. Absolutely, in the UK, I guess, well, Europe-wide, there's ResCoop. In the UK, we have Community Energy England, who are a member of ResCoop, and some of those organisations have become really good at sharing practice between communities, and we certainly the work that we do supporting Scottish and Welsh Government, we try to work closely alongside those organisations, because there is a certain amount of kind of trust if it's an organisation like yours that is trying to do the same things and has actually delivered. We understand that experience can sometimes be more powerful than what a external expert might say. So yeah, absolutely, I think all of those things are really important.
Thank you, Graham. I'd like to ask one more question to all the partners. So can you describe in one word what you think is the most important attribute for energy communities? So in one word, what is the key success for energy communities? So if we go around the table again, and we'll start with Spain this time.
I think probably democracy.
Thank you. Democracy, good one. Then we move to Poland.
Let's say just transition to me.
Thank you, just transition. And Heures, Lithuania.
Yeah, I would say freedom.
Freedom, thank you.
Yes.
And Germany, Moritz.
Yeah, it goes into the same direction as what Andreas said, but I'd say what also includes the word energy community is I choose community.
Community, thank you. And the Netherlands, Otto Wido.
I have one word. It's I think they're very practical. So to achieve transition or more equal relationships, democracy, energy communities are very practical.
Thank you. And for Greece, Vangelis. Any other word to add that's not been said yet, Vangelis?
Are you still muted, Vangelis?
I just unmuted you, Vangelis.
Its word is silence.
I don't think it's silence.
freedom and democracy and transition, I say equality.
Quality.
Equality, yeah. Equality.
Quality. Good one. And the UK. Graham.
Hi, yes. I'm going to do one word on perhaps what energy communities need, and then I'm going to use more than one word to expand on it, I'm afraid. So I would say resilience. It's not a word that I like because it's a little bit of a buzzword, but certainly my experience of having worked with alongside energy communities for quite a long time, probably 15 to 20 years now, is it's definitely what has sustained and enabled the sector to grow is its kind of determination, its resilience, its ability to adapt. Because when we started working with energy communities, a lot of it was around home energy efficiency, because at the time it was really, really difficult to make a renewables project work. The economics were difficult and there wasn't a support framework in place. So people were just starting with what they could do, of engaging people around them with climate change and energy and fuel poverty. And then we had the kind of period of feed-in tariff, and communities suddenly found that there was a viable business model. We had a few pioneers, particularly around PV, actually. Also other technologies, hydro and wind as well, but PV in particular, because of the kind of wide range of applications for that technology. And that became the thing that energy communities were doing, basically because there was, all of a sudden, it was possible to do that, and it was possible to achieve real carbon emission savings and have a visible impact. And people did a really good job of sharing the models and the experience to be able to deliver that. And then we've had kind of cuts in the feed-in tariff, the level of support under feed-in tariff, and the sector's adapting again, and that's part of what's driving it towards innovation and towards combining demand side measures with generation as well, and looking at on-site. So I think it's that determination and creativity that has enabled the sector to constantly adapt, and I think will sustain it into the future.
Thank you, Graham. I think that was a bit more than one word, but thank you very much.
Rebecca, as ever.
As ever. And just to add one more word from my side, ambition. So drive and ambition, and eagerness and openness to learn from others. Graham, looking at the time, would you like to ask one more question, or do you think it's time to move to the wrap up?
So we do have one more question that we haven't asked. I can't see any others. I think we've covered most of them. So there was one that that Vido actually posed, which is, are DSOs participating enough? How are they addressed to see energy communities as part of the solution instead of part of the problem? Which is a good question, because it kind of highlights that aspect that we perhaps haven't talked about quite so much yet, about the role of the network operators in all of this. And I think, shall I do a quick comment and then hand over?
Yeah.
Just that I talk too much. But I think it's been a really interesting area. It seems to be quite different across different countries. In the UK, there has been some really good work done just literally over the last couple of years, with non-profit sector, Regener, an organisation that's worked really hard in this area with the network operators, because we had very specific issues that the network is quite congested in some places in the UK, not everywhere, and it was a real barrier for a lot of energy communities. Energy communities were being hit with huge bills to connect a new project to the network, because they were the project that was tipping the network over into needing to do the capital investment. But there has been a lot of really good work that's happened since, good exchange, kind of regular events, and actually the network operators are starting to respond really positively, and the regulator is kind of driving them towards listening to their stakeholders. So there are some really good examples, and we're going to share one of those in the next webinar on the 8th. So some good examples to share there from UK at least. Don't know if anyone else had any comments on the situation in different countries with working with the network operators, with the DSOs.
I could comment on first on an example from the United States. Their energy communities, for a large part, is taken up by utilities, united in SEPA. That's like a branch organization of utilities, I think, in the south of the United States. And that solves also part of the financial question we had here in Europe. I think that links to the historical position of utilities in each country. Some have more power than in other countries. In Spain, they're very powerful, I think, from reading the press. In Greece, it seems very organized. So that's more like on a higher level where they start from. And in the Netherlands, you might say they're liberalized. So they very much in all ways are disconnected from power generation, and they run into this problem, this limitation, and there's some opening space for them to go into local storage facilities. I'm talking about the DSOs now, of course, that they cannot own them because that would make them energy companies, but they will be allowed to develop services on local storage and perhaps invest, as long as they don't own them again. So there you go into a gray area of who's doing what. So I think that but we really need that, and that's a question maybe for the 8th I would like to pose. Are energy communities and a high level of self-consumption in the future indispensable for achieving the high energy goals in most countries? So far, we're still we're still in the beginning. Where few countries are above 50%. Well, some Sweden and Norway perhaps, but usually it's, especially the Netherlands, we're still around, I think, 10 or so. And PV penetration is still it's now rapidly growing, but it's still at 3-4%. That order. It's growing now every year, so it could be 5 or 6 already. And we already have these congestion problems, just like in the UK, and there are different solutions. And also for the DSO, they play a different role in each of these solutions. And I have a feeling that the energy communities are not considered as a viable solution up till now. And I think that in order to achieve really high percentages, that could be a big mistake. So coming back to the future scenarios, how necessary are energy communities, not only from a political point of view of democracy and equality, but also from a grid perspective, or are we going to have this transition just with centralized large-scale PV? That would be my concluding remark. And it's still open very much in the Netherlands. I think that debate is very open still. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Otto. Any more reflections before we move to the wrap-up?
Yes, Rebecca, it's Piotr from Poland. Actually, I would like to say that maybe some of you are aware of the fact, but maybe you are not, that the PV sector in Poland is booming these days due to the fact that the government started many financial support schemes for prosumer PV installations, and many individuals and also enterprises, public authorities are looking nowadays into the opportunity of installing PV installation because it is profitable indeed nowadays, and simple payback time, taking into account all the financial support, could be reduced even to 6 years. So this is very short time, and this is a very good opportunity for many actors. And due to this rapid development of PV sector, we also face some problem with grid congestion, and we have some places with high concentration of micro PV installations where there is a problem with the grid, with local network. But the positive fact is that distribution system operators are responding very positively on this issue, and they do develop grid infrastructure equally to the development of PV market. So they replace transformers, and they equip necessary infrastructure in order to provide smooth operation of the grid. So this is positive fact, but this is of course caused by different situation in the infrastructure in the grid, because the grid was designed many years ago for only for the flow of electricity only in one direction, and now we face simply different situation, because prosumers they generate electricity, but they also feed electricity into the grid, and this is also a huge amount in some areas. But as I said, and I would like to highlight this, that distribution system operators they restore the infrastructure very much. And another thing is also in Poland, distribution system operators are involved physically and financially in many energy communities ideas. So maybe not only because we have several distribution system operators in Poland, but some of them are partners in energy cooperatives, and their involvement is relevant, and this approach should be continued in the next years, I believe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Piotr. Graham, I think this brings us to the wrap up, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, I will try to do this, but please feel free to chip in, Graham, if you want to add anything, and any of the other partners, of course. So first of all, I'd like to thank all our speakers, all the audience of today for being with us. I see most of the participants are still online, so not many people have left, which is a good sign. So thank you very much for participating today. I think there's been a lot of information to digest, a lot of interesting facts and figures you heard this morning from the presentations. And once again, we will make those available on our website, and there will also be a recorded version which you can look back on or pass on to colleagues who weren't able to join today. So I think I'll try and pick out a few things from today's discussion. I think we've learned today that one of the main things we've learned is that energy communities, they differ per country. There's not one that's the same, and there's not one size that fits all. It's a kind of a jigsaw puzzle. And we've learned that sharing information with each other is essential and very valuable. I think also I'd just like to pull out a few words that sprung out from the discussions. So empowering citizens was mentioned a few times. Freedom, viability, profitability, also resilience, trust, also extremely important in setting up a community, creativity. At the same time, we also face some barriers, complexities, bureaucracy, grid congestion. So I think the main vision is that energy communities do play an increasingly important role in delivering a smart, flexible, zero carbon future, and that this future will require a policy regime that allows the development of new markets and models, such as peer-to-peer supply of renewable energy, and which appropriately reflects the additional costs of fossil fuels, for example, through carbon tax, and the need to transition to efficient use of zero carbon fuels. Another thing we heard was the just transition, that we have to make this fair and not leave anybody behind. And on my last note, I would also like to thank our colleagues at the Energy Saving Trust for making this possible. It was quite a challenge. As Graham mentioned at the beginning, or Michael, we would have preferred to have seen you all in person, of course. But our one main dissemination event has actually become 3 events. And I would like to invite you to join us then in our next 2 webinars. So as we mentioned at the beginning, the next one will be next Wednesday. So same time, same space. So on the 8th of July, you can see on the slide now. So please, please sign up for them on the website, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming webinars. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. See you soon.